town where she grew up wasn't the kind of place that made headlines. It was tucked away in the rolling plains of Nebraska, where highways stretched straight for miles and wheat fields rose tall in the summer sun. Life there was slow, predictable, almost ordinary, yet behind the quiet rhythm of church Sundays and county fairs, one small house on the edge of town held a girl who would one day change the way soldiers spoke about distance, patience, and precision. Her name was Elena Rodriguez. To most people in the neighborhood, she was just that quiet girl who spent too much time in the woods. She wasn't drawn to shopping malls, gossip, or parties like many of her classmates. Instead, she was fascinated by stillness, how the forest seemed to hold its breath when the deer emerged at dawn, how the wind carried secrets across the open fields. She didn't know it yet, but she was learning the art of observation long before anyone would hand her a uniform. Her father, a mechanic by trade and a hunter by tradition, was the first to put a rifle in her hands. It wasn't anything powerful, just a battered .22 that had seen years of use. She was 8 years old the first time he set up aluminum cans along the fence post and told her to try. The rifle was almost too heavy for her small frame, but her hands were steady. She narrowed her eyes, adjusted her breath the way her father instructed, and squeezed the trigger. The can spun backward in the dirt. Beginner's luck, her father chuckled, but when she knocked down 3 more in a row, his smile shifted to something more serious. He knelt beside her, brushing the smell of gunpowder from her hair. "You got an eye, kiddo. Don't waste it." From then on, shooting became their ritual. While other girls spent weekends at sleepovers, Elena was out in the field with her father, learning how to adjust for distance, how to count for wind, and how to know, just by instinct, when to take a shot and when to wait. She learned patience not just as a skill, but as a way of life. By the time she was 15, her reputation in town had shifted. At county fairs, when locals competed at the shooting booths, someone would inevitably nudge toward her and whisper, "Bet Elena could beat them blindfolded." Her quiet presence began to carry weight, though she never flaunted it. She wasn't arrogant, just focused. Her father always told her, "A shooter's ego is heavier than a rifle, and it'll throw your aim every time." Still, town alone wasn't enough to satisfy her. She wanted challenge. She wanted purpose. And that's where the Marine Corps first entered her mind. The idea didn't come from recruiters or patriotic posters. It came one night as she sat with her father on the porch after a long day of hunting. He was cleaning the old .22, and she was staring at the fading horizon. "You ever think about what comes next?" she asked him. "What do you mean? After high school? I don't want to stay here forever. I want something bigger, something that tests me." Her father set down the rifle, studying her face carefully. He saw determination there, the same kind he had seen when she lined up her first shot years ago. "The Marines will test you," he said finally, "but they'll chew you up if you're not ready." She thought about that conversation for weeks. The Marines wasn't just escape from small town life. It was a place where discipline mattered, where skill had purpose. By her senior year, the decision was made. When she first told her friends, laughter followed. "You in the Marines? You'll last a week," one boy teased. Even some teachers doubted her, suggesting she'd be better off with college or trade school. But Elena wasn't swayed. Doubt only hardened her resolve. The day she signed her enlistment papers, her mother cried quietly at the kitchen table. Her father, however, said nothing. He simply slid a box across the counter. Inside was a worn cleaning kit, its brushes and oils neatly arranged. "Doesn't matter what rifle they give you," he said. "Respect it, care for it, and it'll take care of you." Basic training was brutal. The Marines stripped away small-town comforts and tested every weakness. Elena endured the physical grind, but what truly set her apart was her focus. During rifle qualification, she outshot nearly everyone in her platoon. Instructors raised eyebrows when her score stayed consistently near perfect. She wasn't just good, she was exceptional. One drill instructor, a grizzled veteran named Staff Sergeant Williams, took particular notice after watching her calmly hit targets others missed. He muttered, "That girl doesn't shoot, she calculates." His words spread among the cadre, and soon whispers followed her just as they had back home. But Elena wasn't aiming for recognition. She wanted the hardest path, the one nearly everyone told her was impossible: sniper school. At the time, the program wasn't just grueling, it was exclusionary by reputation, dominated by men who doubted women could endure its demands. Still, Elena applied. Her acceptance drew skepticism, even hostility. On her first day, she overheard one trainee say, "She won't last a month." She didn't bother to respond. She let her trigger finger do the talking. The training pushed every limit. Endless ruck marches, concealment exercises in heat and cold, hours spent lying motionless in uncomfortable positions. Some candidates broke down, others quit. Elena endured. She learned to crawl through brush without making a sound, to blend into landscapes until even instructors lost sight of her. Her patience, honed in childhood woods, became her greatest weapon. The rifle she was eventually assigned, the Barrett .50, was a beast compared to her father's .22. Heavy, loud, and unforgiving. But Elena didn't flinch. She studied it, respected it, and treated it not as a burden, but as an extension of herself. Soon, instructors who doubted her were forced to acknowledge her skill. By graduation, Elena wasn't just another soldier with a sniper qualification. She was already becoming a legend among her peers. And though she didn't know it yet, the calm, quiet girl who once knocked soda cans off a fence post was walking a path that would lead her to a shot so extraordinary that even generals would stop in their tracks. Sniper school wasn't just a training course. It was a battlefield in itself. From the moment Elena arrived, she could feel the weight of doubt pressing on her shoulders. Whispers rippled through the candidates, most of them men, many already seasoned in combat. "She won't last," one muttered. Another snickered. "She'll quit before the ruck march ends." Elena heard them, but she didn't answer. She had learned long ago that silence could be a weapon. Words were wasted. Bullets never lied. The first weeks were brutal. Ruck marches stretched over unforgiving terrain, packs weighing more than 50 pounds cutting into shoulders and hips. Some recruits collapsed from exhaustion. Others vomited on the roadside. Elena, small compared to most of the men, carried the same weight without complaint. Each step burned, each muscle screamed, but she refused to let weakness show. Instructors noticed. One, a tall man with a scar running down his jawline, paused during a march and stared at her boots crunching steady in the dirt. "Rodriguez," he barked. "You holding up?" "Yes, Sergeant." He raised an eyebrow. No complaint, no hesitation, just calm. He nodded and walked on. If the marches tested her endurance, the concealment drills tested her mind. Candidates were instructed to vanish into landscapes, fields, forests, ridgelines, while instructors scanned for movement through scopes. Hours dragged by as bugs bit, the sun scorched, and every muscle locked into cramps. Many twitched or shifted, betraying themselves. Elena didn't move. Her years in the woods had taught her the art of stillness. She became part of the environment, a shadow under a tree, a contour in the grass. Instructors passed their scopes over her position, frustrated, unable to find her. When they finally called end exercise, Elena emerged slowly, leaves stuck in her hair, uniform caked in mud. One of her classmates stared at her in disbelief. "You didn't move?" "Not once." She simply shrugged. Didn't need to. Marksmanship tests followed. The ranges stretched farther than most shooters ever imagined. Wind howled across the open fields, shifting bullets inches off target at extreme distances. Candidates cursed under their breath, adjusting scopes, struggling to land hits. Elena studied the flags, the mirage rising from the ground, the angle of the sun. She breathed slowly, squeezed gently, and her targets fell one after another. Instructors stopped hiding their surprise. It wasn't just that she could shoot, it was how she shot, with patience, calculation, and absolute composure. One evening, after a long day on the range, an instructor named Sergeant First Class Thompson pulled her aside. He was a veteran of multiple tours, his reputation built on precision. "Rodriguez," he said, lowering his voice, "you're not just passing these tests. You're setting the standard. You know that, right?" Elena shook her head. "I just do the work." "That's exactly why you're dangerous," he replied. The Barrett .50 became her weapon of choice during advanced phases. At first, even she was humbled by it. The recoil rattled her shoulder, the thunderous blast echoing for miles. But where others struggled, she adapted. She treated the weapon with respect, learning every quirk, the way barrel heat affected trajectory, the way a single grain of misjudged powder could throw the round off course. Slowly, she and the Barrett formed a bond. Other trainees nicknamed it the Beast. For Elena, it became something else, an extension of her discipline. One exercise required hitting a target over 2,000 meters away, a shot so far that even seasoned marksmen often failed. Elena lay prone in the dirt, the Barrett resting steady on its bipod. She studied the wind, adjusted her dope sheet, and listened to her spotter's quiet calculations. Her heart rate slowed until the world seemed to narrow into silence. When she squeezed the trigger, the blast rolled across the field. Seconds later, the steel target rang with a sharp clang. Her spotter exhaled in disbelief. Holy hell, Rodriguez, first shot, word of that spread through class. For the first time, fellow trainees stopped doubting her and started respecting her. Some even sought her advice. By graduation, Elena wasn't just another candidate. She was one of the top shooters of her cycle. The instructors, hardened men who rarely offered praise, gathered the class and delivered their verdict. Most of you won't be remembered outside the school, Thompson told them. But some of you will carry reputations into combat. Rodriguez, people are going to know your name. Deployment orders followed soon after. Elena found herself shipped overseas with a small specialized unit tasked with reconnaissance and overwatch. The environment was harsh, the missions unforgiving. Temperatures soared during the day, plummeted at night. Dust coated everything, and the sound of distant gunfire was constant. On her first real mission, she lay concealed for 14 hours straight, eyes fixed through her scope, watching a village where insurgent activity was suspected. Her back screamed in pain, her lips cracked from dehydration, but she didn't move. When the call came to engage, she adjusted, fired, and dropped the target with surgical precision. Her team leader radioed in the kill, his voice carrying a mix of awe and relief. That night, around the campfire, one of the older soldiers leaned back and said, "I've been in this game a long time. Never seen anyone take a shot that clean on their first deployment." Elena only nodded, quietly cleaning her rifle. For her, it wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about doing the job right every time. The Barrett became her signature in the field. While most snipers cycle between rifles depending on mission, she always requested the .50. Its power, its reach, it suited her. She spent hours maintaining it, memorizing the feel of every part. Other soldiers joked, "Rodriguez loves that thing more than she loves people." She never corrected them. But with skill came responsibility. Commanders began assigning her to missions few others could handle, long-range overwatch, where failure meant casualties. She bore the weight without complaint. Every shot mattered. Every decision carried lives. One mission in particular cemented her reputation. Her team was pinned down by enemy fire from a ridge nearly 2,400 meters away. Ordinary rifles couldn't touch the position. Elena crawled into place, set up the Barrett, and studied the ridgeline. Wind gusted unpredictably. The sun blazed, mirage shimmered. Still, she calculated. She squeezed the trigger. The Barrett roared. And seconds later, the threat was gone. Her team cheered, but she only reloaded, scanning for the next target. When they returned to base, her commanding officer pulled her aside. "Rodriguez, I don't say this often, but you just save lives out there. Hell, you probably saved mine." She nodded once, expression steady. "That's the job, sir." Weeks turned into months, missions into deployments. Each success added to her quiet legend. Soldiers began to speak of her with respect, usually reserved for battle-hardened veterans. They called her the Phantom because enemies never saw her coming. Still, Elena remained humble, never boasting, never seeking attention. To her, the rifle was a tool, the mission a duty. Yet deep down, she knew she was building towards something greater, something that would test her skill beyond anything she had faced. And though she couldn't yet see it, the day would come when the Barrett in her hands would make a shot so extraordinary that it would stop a general in his tracks. For most soldiers, The Barrett .50 caliber was a burden. It weighed 30 pounds unloaded, more with attachments and ammo. Its recoil punished shoulders, its thunderous report echoed across valleys, and its sheer length made it cumbersome in the field. To many, it was a weapon of last resort, brought out only for specific tasks. But to Elena Rodriguez, it was something else entirely. She had carried other rifles, M4, M24S, even lighter sniper systems, but none felt the way the Barrett did. Heavy, yes, but steady. Brutal, yes, but honest. It demanded respect, punishing sloppy form with missed shots or bruised shoulders. Elena respected it the way a craftsman respected her tools. Where others complained, she adapted. Where others hesitated, she leaned into its power. During her second deployment, the Barrett became her permanent assignment. At first, it was because no one else in her unit wanted it. "That beast will break your collarbone if you're not careful," one sergeant muttered, shaking his head when it was handed out. Elena only smiled faintly and stepped forward. Her teammates quickly learned that in her hands, the beast was no burden. She carried it with practiced ease, its weight balanced against her shoulder as though she had been born with it. On the range, she made impossible shots look routine. In the field, she transformed it from a cumbersome tool into a scalpel of precision. Her reputation began to grow. It wasn't long before her commanders noticed. On patrols, Elena often hung back, Barrett slung across her back until needed. But when firefights erupted, she moved with terrifying calm. While others scrambled for cover, she set up, took aim, and ended threats with surgical accuracy. Enemies firing from windows, rooftops, or ridgelines felt her rounds before they even realized she had locked onto them. One night, during a mission in the mountains, her team was pinned down by machine gun fire from across a ravine. The enemy had fortified a position nearly 2,000 meters away, their tracers slicing through the dark. Normal rifles couldn't reach. Mortars were too risky. Their team was too close. All eyes turned to Elena. She dropped into prone, the Barrett steady on its bipod. She slowed her breathing, steady as stone, and adjusted her scope. The wind in the mountains was fickle, gusting and swirling. Her spotter whispered corrections, and she factored them into her calculations. Then silence in her mind. She squeezed. The Barrett roared, fire leaping from the muzzle, echo rolling off the cliffs. Seconds later, the enemy gun went silent. Her teammates exhaled as if they'd been holding their breath for hours. Someone muttered, "She just saved all our asses." From that day on, no one questioned who should carry the Barrett. It belonged to her. With mastery came responsibility. Higher-ups began assigning her the hardest Overwatch missions, where other snipers rotated rifles based on mission profiles. Elena insisted on keeping the Barrett. "It's heavy," her commander said once. "It'll slow you down." "It won't slow me," she replied simply. He gave her a long look, then nodded. Her bond with the rifle wasn't just skill, it was obsession. She spent hours maintaining it, memorizing every detail of its design. To her, the Barrett wasn't just steel and polymer. It was an ally. She could feel the rhythm of its recoil, the quirks of its barrel under heat, the way humidity warped trajectories. While other soldiers went to the mess hall, Elena sat cross-legged with a rifle across her lap, cleaning each piece until it gleamed. Her teammates teased her. "Rodriguez loves that rifle more than people." They'd laugh. But in firefights, their tone shifted. They began to trust her in ways they trusted no one else. If Elena set up with the Barrett, they felt safe. The psychological toll of her role began to show. Snipers lived in the space between patience and violence, hours of waiting in silence, eyes locked on crosshairs, followed by a single life-or-death decision. Elena bore it with discipline, but she wasn't immune to its weight. Late at night, she sometimes thought of the people she had taken down, not their faces, but the choices, the split second where she had judged them a threat and pulled the trigger. Her father's old words echoed in her mind. Respect the rifle. Respect the shot. She respected them by making sure she never missed. One mission etched itself deeper than the rest. Her unit was tasked with providing overwatch for a convoy moving through hostile territory. The landscape was barren, flat plains with only scattered rock outcroppings, perfect for an ambush. Elena scanned the horizon through her scope, heart rate steady, mind calculating. Then she saw them. A group of armed insurgents had set up an RPG team nearly 2,400 meters away, hidden among the rocks. The convoy was rolling directly into range. She radioed the warning, but there was no time to divert. The responsibility was hers alone. Her spotter whispered, "Winds shifting. 2 clicks left." Elena adjusted, her fingers steady on the trigger. The convoy continued forward, unaware of the danger. Her world narrowed into the crosshairs. She fired. The Barrett thundered, the recoil slamming into her shoulder. Seconds later, the insurgent dropped, the RPG falling harmlessly to the ground. The convoy rolled on safely. When the mission ended, her commander walked up to her, expression unreadable. "You don't know how many lives you saved today," he said quietly. She nodded but said nothing. Inside, she felt the weight settle heavier. She hadn't just pulled a trigger. She had shifted the outcome of a battle. Her reputation reached beyond her unit. Other companies began requesting her Overwatch support. Commanders spoke of her in briefings. "If you want the impossible shot, get Rodriguez." She hated the attention, preferring the silence of her rifle over praise. But the legend of the quiet sniper with the Barrett .50 was spreading. Soldiers told stories of her shots at distances most thought impossible. Some exaggerated, claiming she could hit a target a mile away blindfolded. She ignored the chatter. But deep down, she knew the truth. Her skills were reaching into territory few had ever achieved. The Barrett was no longer just a weapon. It was her identity. And though she couldn't yet know it, every mission, every shot, every hour spent cleaning and carrying that 30-pound beast was leading her toward one moment. A shot so far, so improbable, it would etch her name into military history. The day was coming when her Barrett .50 would speak at 3,200 meters, and the world would listen. War has a way of turning ordinary landscapes into arenas of life and death. For Elena Rodriguez, the barren desert she scanned that morning was nothing more than dust, stone, and heat. But through her scope, it became a chessboard where pieces were moving, and her next decision would change the game forever. Her unit had been deployed to provide overwatch for a joint patrol operating deep in contested territory. Intelligence reports hinted at enemy activity in the area, but no one had predicted the scale of what they were walking into. Elena lay prone on a ridge, Barrett .50 steady on its bipod, eyes fixed through her scope. The sun was merciless, baking the earth, creating shimmering mirages that danced across the horizon. Sweat dripped down her neck, soaking into her uniform, but her breathing remained calm, controlled. She was used to discomfort. Her spotter, Corporal Jackson, adjusted his binoculars beside her. "Movement," he whispered. "East Ridge. For figures." Elena's scope found them. Insurgents equipped with rifles and what looked like a heavy machine gun were setting up position. At that distance, they were barely specks to the naked eye. Through her glass, every detail sharpened. The glint of metal, the careful positioning behind rocks, the subtle confidence of men who thought they were out of reach. Jackson muttered, That's almost 2 miles out." Elena said nothing. Her mind was already calculating. Distance, wind speed, humidity, the angle of the slope. She measured the drift of heat rising from the sand. Every factor mattered, and every variable could turn a clean shot into a miss. The insurgents began firing. Their rounds arced high and fell short of the patrol, but it was only a matter of time before they adjusted. The patrol had no cover in the open flat. If the machine gun opened up at range, men would die. The radio crackled with urgency. Overwatch were pinned down. "Do you have eyes?" Jackson glanced at her. "They're too far. Nobody hits from here." Elena's cheek pressed against the stock. "We'll see." She adjusted her elevation, her fingers spinning the turrets with deliberate care. The Barrett felt solid beneath her, a living weight that had never failed her before. She steadied her breathing. Inhale, exhale, pause. The crosshairs hovered on the enemy gunner. "Range," she asked. Jackson hesitated. 3,200 meters. 3,200. His voice cracked. "Elena, that's impossible." Not today. The world around her disappeared. The sweat, the heat, the noise, they all fell away. It was only her, the rifle, and a distant figure framed in the glass. Trigger squeeze. The Barrett thundered, its recoil slamming into her shoulder. Dust exploded around her, echo rolling across the ridge. She held her breath, counting the seconds as the .50 caliber round screamed across the desert. Then impact. Through her scope, she saw the enemy gunner collapse, weapon falling from his hands. The insurgents scattered in confusion, ducking for cover. The machine gun went silent. Jackson exhaled violently. Jesus Christ, you hit him. You actually... He stopped, shaking his head. 3,200 meters. Nobody does that. But Elena was already adjusting for a follow-up. She fired again, sending another round downrange. Dust kicked up beside a second insurgent who dove out of sight. The rest broke and ran. The patrol radioed in, voices filled with relief and disbelief. Overwatch, enemy suppressed. Who the hell took that shot? Elena remained silent, reloading smoothly, scanning for more threats. Jackson answered instead, still stunned. Rodriguez. Staff Sergeant Elena Rodriguez. She just dropped a target at over 3,000 meters. The line went quiet before someone muttered, "No way." When they returned to base, the story spread faster than wildfire. At first, soldiers dismissed it as rumor, an exaggeration born from adrenaline. But the spotter confirmed it. The patrol confirmed it. And when the rangefinder data was pulled, the number was undeniable: 3,200 meters. For the sniper community, it was earth-shaking. Records existed of long-distance kills, but none from someone like Elena, young female, relatively new to combat. For her, it wasn't about records. It was about necessity. Men lived because she had made that shot. Still, she felt the shift immediately. Where once she had blended quietly into her unit, now eyes lingered. Soldiers who used to tease her about the Barrett now regarded it, and her, with reverence. Commanders spoke her name in briefings. Younger recruits whispered about her like she was already a legend. Jackson never stopped talking about it. At Chow, he leaned over to another squad and said, "You don't get it. I was there. I saw it. 3,200 meters. That's like hitting a soda can from the length of 30 football fields." Elena only shook her head. It was the job. But deep down, she knew it was more. It had been a test, not just of her skill, but of her discipline and her patience, her ability to trust everything she had learned since she was a child on a shooting range with her father. The Army recorded it formally, entering it into the log as one of the longest confirmed sniper kills in modern history. The paperwork was dry, factual, clinical, but in the barracks, in the mess halls, and across bases, the story grew larger than life. Some soldiers refused to believe it until they spoke to Jackson themselves. Others asked Elena for details, desperate to understand how she had pulled it off. She never gave them much. "You line up, you calculate, you trust your rifle," she would say. But Jackson told them the truth. She didn't admit it wasn't just skill. She went ice cold, calm as if she was back on a damn range. No flinch, no hesitation, like she knew the bullet was going to land before it left the barrel. That night, when the base finally quieted, Elena sat alone with the Barrett across her lap. The rifle was still warm from cleaning, the metal gleaming under the dim light. She thought her father's old words. Respect the rifle. Respect the shot. She had respected it. She had trusted it. And together, they had done the impossible. But with the accomplishment came a weight she hadn't expected. That shot was no longer just hers. It belonged to the Army now. It belonged to history. And as she closed her eyes, she wondered how many more impossible shots the future would demand from her. The desert winds had barely settled after Elena's impossible shot before the story began traveling faster than any bullet she could fire. First, it was a murmur within her platoon. Then it rippled through the base. By the time the convoy rolled back in from patrol that night, Elena's name was already being spoken with a mix of disbelief and awe. 3,200 meters, one soldier scoffed at Chow. "Come on, that's a campfire story." His buddy shook his head. "Ask Jackson. He was her spotter. He won't shut up about it." Indeed, Corporal Jackson had become her unexpected herald. Where Elena remained quiet, He filled in the silence. I watched the whole thing, he told anyone who would listen. She didn't even flinch. Just line it up and bam. The guy dropped like she reached across the desert with her hand. Elena hated the attention. She sat in the corner of the mess hall, eating quickly, keeping her eyes down. But she could feel them staring, could hear the whispers swelling into something louder. Some were impressed, others skeptical. A few seemed resentful, but none ignored it. Recognition came whether she wanted it or not. At formation, her CO presented her with a commendation in front of the unit. Applause rippled through the ranks, though Elena's expression remained steady. To her, it felt less like honor and more like exposure. Later, Jackson clapped her on the shoulder. "Smile for once, will you? You just made the rest of us look like rookies." She smirked faintly. "You're welcome." But not everyone was celebratory. In the barracks, Elena overheard a group of older snipers muttering. "Lucky shot," one said dismissively. 3,200's not possible without fluke conditions. She's just the Army's next poster girl. They'll milk this one. The words stung, though Elena never confronted them. She knew doubt was natural. She'd once doubted others' claims herself. Still, it was strange. Her proudest professional moment was also the one that isolated her the most. Beyond the base, the ripple spread even farther. News outlets back home caught wind of the story. Military blogs speculated, some heralding her as a groundbreaking figure, others calling it propaganda. Her name appeared in headlines she hadn't agreed to. Her mother called weeks later, voice trembling with pride. "Honey, they're talking about you on the news. Is it true? Did you really?" Elena swallowed hard. "Yeah, Mom, it's true." There was silence. Then her mother whispered, "Your father will be proud." The words hit harder than the recoil of any rifle. Elena felt a lump in her throat, but kept her voice steady. "I hope so." The attention also drew higher-ranking eyes. Generals touring the region asked to meet her. One, a decorated officer with years of combat under his belt, stopped during inspection when he saw the small badge on her uniform, the one denoting her sniper qualification, and more recently, the informal marking of her 3,200-meter shot. He studied it, then looked at her. "You're the one they're all talking about." "Yes, sir." He paused and shook his head, half in disbelief, half in respect. "I've met hundreds of soldiers, but I've never met one who bent the laws of ballistics like you did. Good work, Sergeant." It was one of the few times she felt the weight of her achievement in full. Not from the clapping of peers, not from the headlines, but from the quiet acknowledgement of a man who had seen too much war to be easily impressed. Yet with recognition came new pressure. The Army began assigning her to higher-stakes Overwatch missions, often in environments where her skills were tested to the edge. She became both asset and symbol, and symbols carry expectations. One night, lying in her cot, Elena stared at the ceiling while Jackson snored nearby. She thought of the word legend. Soldiers had started calling her that. A legend for a shot, a legend for survival. But legends weren't people. They didn't bleed or doubt or lie awake, wondering if the next mission would demand something even greater. And Elena Rodriguez was still just a soldier, caught between the simplicity of her duty and the noise of her reputation. As sleep finally overtook her, she whispered to herself the only truth she could hold on to. It was just a shot, nothing more. But deep down, she knew it had become much more than that, and there was no turning back. The desert never cared who carried a rifle, never cared about medals, and never whispered legends. It just burned, stretched, and tested anyone who walked its endless dust. Yet for Elena Rodriguez, the desert had changed after her record shot. No longer was she just another face behind a scope. Now she was a sniper. And with that came a weight heavier than any rifle. Her reputation became a double-edged sword. The same commanders who once overlooked her now requested her by name. Missions she might not have been assigned before suddenly landed on her desk. "Rodriguez will cover it," they'd say, as if invoking her name ensured success. Jackson joked about it one morning as they checked their gear. "You realize you're the Army's insurance policy now, right? If it's risky, they just toss you into the equation." Elena smirked faintly. "Yeah, and what happens when the math doesn't work?" Jackson gave her a look but didn't answer. Each mission brought new challenges, and with them, new expectations. Elena still provided overwatch, still calculated extreme distances, and still made life and death decisions with calm precision. But now she did so with perspective tempered by experience. She knew that perfection was unattainable. She knew that legends were often myths built by necessity, luck, and perception. And she knew that above all, being human, hesitant, reflective, vulnerable, was not weakness, but strength. During one particularly difficult mission, an enemy combatant moved into range with a weapon aimed at an unarmed target. Elena's fingers flexed on the trigger. She paused, calculated, adjusted, and then she fired. The target was neutralized, the threat eliminated. But this time, she felt a wave of gratitude wash over her, not just for her rifle, not just for her training, but for the clarity she now possessed. She had acted decisively without letting the legend dictate her choice. Jackson, observing beside her, gave a subtle nod of approval. "That's the difference," he said. "You found it." Elena allowed herself a small smile. Back at base, the recognition continued, but it no longer weighed on her the way it had. Medals were awarded, commendations noted, and stories of the 3,200-meter shot circulated for the record books. She accepted them politely, acknowledging the honor without allowing it to overshadow her identity. Junior soldiers approached her, wide-eyed and nervous. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, one said, "What's it like to be you?" Elena paused, considering her words. "It's not about being me. It's about doing your job, knowing your limits, and trusting your team. Skills matter, decisions matter, but legends, they're just stories we tell to make sense of the impossible." The young soldier nodded, understanding the weight behind her simplicity. Elena realized that teaching, guiding, and sharing her experience was now as important as any mission. She was no longer just a sniper. She was a mentor, a symbol not of infallibility, but of resilience, discipline, and humanity. She walked through the barracks later that evening, Barrett slung across her back. Soldiers who once stared in awe now greeted her casually, recognizing not a legend, but a leader. She laughed quietly at a joke someone told, a sound unburdened by expectation. In private moments, she reflected on the journey, the rigorous training, the first long-range shots, the early doubts, the thrill of the impossible and the crushing weight of fame. They had all converged to forge her. She had been tested, broken, and rebuilt, not into an untouchable myth, but into a soldier who understood herself. That understanding, she realized, was the truest victory. The desert stretched infinitely beyond the base, golden and harsh, familiar and unforgiving. Elena climbed a ridge once more, Barrett in hand, eyes sweeping the horizon. She remembered her father's lessons: patience, precision, respect for the rifle, respect for life. Those principles had guided her through every shot, every mission, and every moment of doubt. And now, standing above the world she had helped protect, she understood the full weight of her journey. The rifle, the legend, the impossible shots, they were all part of a larger truth. She was a soldier who would face extremes and emerge intact, not because she was perfect, but because she remained human. Jackson joined her silently, scanning the valley below. "What now?" he asked. Elena looked through her scope at the undulating desert, the endless ridges, the tiny figures moving far below. She adjusted her bipod and sighed contentedly. "Now we keep going. One mission at a time, one shot at a time. And we remember who we are while we do it." Jackson smiled. "Good answer." She lowered her rifle, feeling the metal cool beneath her fingertips. For the first time in months, she felt free. Not free from the missions, not free from the desert, but free from a weight of expectation. She carried her rifle, her skills, her history, and her humanity together, balanced. It was a harmony she had fought for, struggled for, and finally achieved. The sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the desert in crimson and violet. Elena took a deep breath, feeling the wind across her face. She was Elena Rodriguez, soldier, sniper, mentor, human. And the legend, that was just a part of her story, not the whole. The desert, endless and eternal, seemed to whisper in approval. And for the first time, she listened, not as a myth, not as a legend, but as herself. She raised the Barrett once more, scanning the distance, ready for whatever came next. Because now she carried not just skill or fame, but wisdom, the understanding that true strength lies in the balance of precision and humanity. And with that, she smiled. The sun rose over the desert, painting the ridges in shades of gold and crimson. Elena Rodriguez lay prone on a familiar ridge, Barrett .50 resting across her shoulder, eyes scanning the horizon. The world seemed quiet, almost serene, but she knew better. War never truly rested, and neither did a sniper's mind. Yet for the first time in months, Elena felt a sense of calm. The weight of legend, the relentless pressure, and the scrutiny from every corner of the military sphere, all of it had settled into a manageable rhythm. She had survived, yes, but more importantly, she had learned to survive herself. Jackson, ever loyal, joined her at the observation post, binoculars in hand. "Another quiet morning," he said, voice low. "Enjoy it while it lasts." Elena glanced at him, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I do," she admitted. "It's rare." They sat in silence, two soldiers perched above the desert, reflecting on the countless missions, the impossible shots, and the lives that hung in the balance between them. It had been nearly a year since the 3,200-meter shot, the moment that had changed everything. Soldiers still whispered about it. Analysts still studied it. Her name circulated among military circles like a quiet storm. But to Elena, the shot was a memory, not a title. IT had saved lives, yes, but it had also been a crucible. That single bullet, traveling further than almost anyone dared to imagine, had forced her to confront her limits, her fears, and the part of herself she sometimes wanted to deny. She remembered the moments of doubt, the weight of expectation, the isolation that came with excellence. All of it had shaped her into someone who could carry both a rifle and the responsibility with clarity. She reached down and ran her fingers along the stock of her Barrett, smooth, solid, unyielding. The rifle had been her constant companion, her tool, and at times her burden. But unlike before, she no longer allowed it to define her. She defined herself. The missions continued as they always would. Intelligence reported threats across the desert, insurgent movements in valleys, and hostile patrols near supply lines. Elena still provided overwatch, still calculated extreme distances, and still made life-and-death decisions with calm precision. But now she did so with perspective tempered by experience. She knew that perfection was unattainable. She knew that legends were often myths built by necessity, luck, and perception. And she knew that above all, being human, hesitant, reflective, vulnerable, was not weakness, but strength. During one mission, an enemy combatant moved into range with a weapon aimed at unarmed civilians. Elena's fingers flexed on the trigger. She paused, calculated, adjusted, and then she fired. The target was neutralized, the threat eliminated. But this time, she felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. Not just for her rifle, not just for her training, but for the clarity she now possessed. She had acted decisively without letting the legend dictate her choice. Jackson, observing beside her, gave a subtle nod of approval. "That's the difference," he said. "You found it." Elena allowed herself a small smile. Back at base, the recognition continued, but it no longer weighed on her the way it had. Medals were awarded, commendations noted, and stories of the 3,200-meter shot circulated for the record books. She accepted them politely, acknowledging the honor without allowing it to overshadow her identity. Junior soldiers approached her, wide-eyed and nervous. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez. One said, "What's it like to be you?" Elena paused, considering her words. "It's not about being me. It's about doing your job, knowing your limits, and trusting your team. Skills matter, decisions matter, but legends, they're just stories we tell to make sense of the impossible." The young soldier nodded, understanding the weight behind her simplicity. Elena realized that teaching, guiding, and sharing her experience was now as important as any mission. She was no longer just a sniper. She was a mentor, a symbol not of infallibility, but of resilience, discipline, and humanity. She walked to the barracks later that evening, Barrett slung across her back. Soldiers who had once stared in awe now greeted her casually, recognizing not a legend, but a leader. She laughed quietly at a joke someone told, a sound unburdened by expectation, and private moments. She reflected on the journey, the rigorous training, the first long-range shots, the early doubts, the thrill of the impossible, and the crushing weight of fame. They had all converged to forge her. She had been tested, broken, and rebuilt, not into an untouchable myth, but into a soldier who understood herself. That understanding, she realized, was the truest victory. The desert stretched infinitely beyond the base, golden and harsh, familiar and unforgiving. Elena climbed a ridge once more, barrett in hand, eyes sweeping the horizon. She remembered her father's lessons: patience, precision, respect for the rifle, respect for life. Those principles had guided her through every shot, every mission, and every moment of doubt. And now, standing above the world she had helped protect, she understood the full weight of her journey. The rifle, the legend, the impossible shots. They were all part of a larger truth. She was a soldier who had faced extremes and emerged intact, not because she was perfect, but because she remained human. Jackson joined her silently, scanning the valley below. "What now?" he asked. Elena looked through her scope at the undulating desert, the endless ridges, the tiny figures moving far below. She adjusted her bipod and sighed contentedly. "Now we keep going. One mission at a time, one shot at a time. And we remember who we are while we do it." Jackson smiled. "Good answer." She lowered her rifle, feeling the metal cool beneath her fingertips. For the first time in months, she felt free. Not free from the missions, not free from the desert, but free from the weight of expectation. She carried her rifle, her skills, her history, and her humanity together, balanced. It was a harmony she had fought for, struggled for, and finally achieved. The sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the desert in crimson and violet. Elena took a deep breath, feeling the wind across her face. She was Elena Rodriguez, soldier, sniper, mentor, human. And the legend? That was just a part of her story, not the whole. The desert, endless and eternal, seemed to whisper in approval. And for the first time, she listened, not as a myth, not as a legend, but as herself. She raised the barrett once more, scanning the distance, ready for whatever came next. Because now she carried not just skill or fame, but wisdom, the understanding that true strength lies in the balance of precision and humanity. And with that, she smiled.